hello, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Amberlyn Esperanza, and I am the president of PROPEL. We are a branch of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, and in my day job, I'm a commercial loan officer at Mascoma Bank. Welcome to today's very first Lunch and Learn series. Now, today's topic is human resources in small businesses and startups. We are presented here with two of our very own board members, Brita and Emily. And in today's presentation, it will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website, news and events. Visit our website at portlandregion.com, check out the events page, and sign up for PROPEL's email newsletter while you are there. And be sure to be on the lookout for our next networking event late in July and the annual Ignition Awards in January. Please follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and like us on Facebook for more upcoming info. Now, before we get to today's presentation, I want to remind our audience that we are using the online broadcasting platform StreamYard for all virtual chamber events. This platform is really cool and provides many improved production interaction elements that I think you will love to see. I'd also remind you that if you do have questions for our presenters, please type them in the YouTube chat and we will relay them back at the end of the presentation for questions. And we'll save some more time for Q&A at the conclusion of the event. Now, let's get started to our presentation. I'm so excited to welcome Brita and Emily. Let's bring Brita and Emily to the stage here. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd love for you to introduce yourselves. Maybe we'll start with Brita.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brita Loppnow. I am the founder of Prosper HR. I provide fractional HR services and as an HR consultant to startups and small businesses. My background is in working with tech companies and startups, and I also worked at McKinsey & Company doing internal HR roles there. So I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm really excited to dive in.
Thank you. And Emily, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Waddell. I practice labor and employment law at Waddell in Portland. And my practice really focuses on a couple different areas. So everything from the litigation of employment disputes to matters before the National Labor Relations Board. And apart from litigation, just day-to-day general counseling. So that could be anything from employee relations issues to employee handbooks or other types of, policy drafting, transactional work. Really excited to be here today. And thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, the two of you, for serving on PROPEL's board, as well as providing resources to the community as a whole. Now, I want to treat this like a conversation. It's more like a lunch and learn roundtable, but how about we get the audience involved here? Let's start out with some poll questions just to see who is out there. Tell us a little bit about your business. Now, how to do this is go to menti.com and use that code at the top. You don't have to sign up for an account. You don't have to download anything. Just go right to the website and answer this question for us. Just to provide some insight. I know it's still a little early in the event here, but we'll give some folks some time here. But we got one answer here that they have more than 10 employees. Okay, perfect. Any thoughts, Brita and Emily, as these answers are coming in from the audience?
I'm excited to kind of dig into this a little bit more and understand, hopefully during maybe some of the question and answer time, we'll be able to answer some more directed questions here.
What a really cool way to have a poll. All right, we are on to our next question. This will help Britta and Emily guide what to focus on today for different parts of the presentation, what they can elaborate more. And that has. Great, we have one answer. We have another one coming in.
Seems like we have several people on the same page here, so this is good.
And it's stuff we prepared for, so perfect. Where are you and your employees located? Now, this is a fun question. I didn't expect any international, really, but
You never know.
You never know. This is really good insight. We're so excited. Thank you, everyone, for joining. You're probably eating your lunch right now, but luckily you don't need your cameras on. Only Emily, Britta, and I are going to show our faces today, but love the interaction here. And let's get started. We can jump in here. I want to jump into the basics. Let's go into maybe this question. Let's say I want to hire my first employee. What would you both recommend that I do next?
Emily, would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
Sure. No, I can kind of jump in on this one, but Britta, please feel free to jump in as well. So I think when you first think about hiring a new employee, certainly from an employment law standpoint, there's a lot going on in this area. And just looking at the poll, it looks like we do have some folks that, are just themselves in their company right now. So if I was in someone's shoes that was really focusing on that next step, the first thing I would kind of want to do is figure out, what's the person going to be doing that you're bringing on? Obviously from a business perspective, but certainly from a law perspective, you're going to want to make sure that whatever that position is, that you're paying that person appropriately. So, when we think about wage and hour law in the US, we have federal law, so that applies to everyone, obviously, and then we also have state law. And you have to comply with both, depending on the state in which you're operating in, to make sure that you're not violating federal or state regulations. So there's a lot there. For example, laws can cover everything from when people get paid, rest breaks, whether or not you have to pay people on a regular cadence. In most states, you do. For example, in Maine, you have to pay wages at regular intervals, no greater than 16 days. So you're going to want to make sure that you're complying with all of those provisions. And the first thing that I would do there is really assess the job and see kind of if they would be exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act or if they would be non-exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. There are other considerations that you have to make as well. When we say, I want to hire my first employee, there's also another concept called, independent contractors, which I'm sure many people on the call are familiar with. And a lot of times, startups will kind of err in that direction. They want to hire the independent contractor because there are advantages from a employment law standpoint. So for example, some discrimination laws or employment laws might not apply to you if you have independent contractors versus employees. And that might be something just in the beginning as you're building your workforce that's more appealing so that you don't fall under all these different umbrellas and have to comply with all of these new laws. But there's a lot to kind of go through with that, certainly from an employment law standpoint. So that would probably be my first step is look at the job, look at what you want the person to do, and figure out how you're going to pay them. And I know that's a big answer to that question, Britta. So I do want you to jump in too with it from a HR standpoint if there's something you think that would be more advantageous to hit first. But for me, that's what really kind of stands out.
That's very helpful to hear. From my perspective, so I look at things from more of like a strategic HR standpoint. And from my perspective, I would ensure that is there an offer letter in place for if we're looking at employees specifically. So starting from the basics of having an offer letter. Some may have an employee agreement. And then from there, kind of looking at what else is next in that. After they sign the offer letter, what happens after that? So in terms of the people side of things, I would probably look at setting up even a small but robust onboarding and pre-onboarding plan. As a company grows, they may want to look at creating more of an onboarding program. But I think just having the bare bones and the foundational pieces for those who are starting out as hiring their first 1, 2, 3 employees would be very beneficial. And so things to look at, in an onboarding plan, I personally would break it down into more of like a pre-onboarding. So that to me is like, does the employee know where to go, how to log in on their first day? Do they have the equipment they need? Everything leading up to their first day would be pre-onboarding. And then everything from their first day on would be onboarding. And so that includes understanding which HR documents, such as an I-9, W-4, those types of documents that do need to be completed by the new hire. And then also creating, adding meetings and a regular cadence of communication to that new hire's onboarding plan. And other aspects, and all companies do this differently, of course, but I think there are some basics that help set up the new hire for success. Some other pieces could be creating a 30, 60, 90 review kind of probationary period where you're having constant check-ins and going over what the new hire's new role and responsibilities look like. So, those are areas that I would focus on as an HR consultant in getting set up for employers to focus on and have a successful onboarding process.
That's some great insight. Thank you both so much. And I can see how hiring your first employee can be a little nerve-wracking and make people nervous. And a lot of what you said can be scary if you don't do it the right way. So really breaking it down into pieces, starting with an onboarding and breaking it down and finding professionals like the both of you as well. So thank you for that answer. Now, as I think about that, thinking about hiring the first employee, the lack of talent out there, and maybe you want to go national outside of the state of Maine. What if folks want to hire outside of the state of Maine?
I can jump in to start. There's such great talent everywhere, right? And so it's like trying to find somebody that fits the role and would be a good fit for your organization. It all can seem very overwhelming, of course. But hiring remotely, I do think that there's a lot of considerations and to kind of take in. From my perspective, Emily can go into the compliance side of things, but in terms of people and HR focus, I'd focus on the engagement side. How are you going to create a culture, a company culture with remote employees? And we've talked about this a lot with the pandemic, so I won't go into, I'll keep it kind of high level at this moment. But creating engagement and that, what does that look like? And it looks different for every single organization. Is it regular online meetings? Is it, is it having like a Slack channel where everyone can engage and have community that way? And so I guess for me, starting kind of to look at talent from a remote perspective, I would look at employee engagement and how are you going to create an ongoing community of employees. And then the other part to that is, and I don't want to dive too much into what Emily may want to say, but I think just looking at how does a remote employee impact your business? And that could be from a variety of perspectives, from compliance to ensuring, like, do you have a handbook that's written for different states? There's a lot of aspects that you it's not just like, okay, I've found someone in Colorado, I'm going to hire them now. There's a process that needs to happen before that person actually joins the team.
Yeah, no, Britta, those are really great points. I guess, the only thing I would kind of add on to that is, like I mentioned with the last question, the state laws kind of can come into play. So what we have to remember is that the work location drives the law. It's not where the company headquarters is. So just because the company is headquartered in Maine or another state, if you have an employee that's working in another state that's not where the company headquarters is, we're going to look to that state in terms of the state laws that apply to them. Now, if it's one employee, you might not get tagged with all of the laws in that state, depending on what they are regulating. But it's important to be mindful of, because there may be differences compared to Maine that you have to adjust for that employee. Other things that kind of come top of mind to me, there could be tax implications in the work location that are different than Maine. You might need to register your business in that state in order to make sure that you're deducting the appropriate payroll withholdings. So just things to kind of like be mindful of. Leave laws, that's another thing that can really come into play in different jurisdictions. So, that's not to say that you shouldn't hire a remote employee. I think it's definitely doable, but you just want to go into it incredibly mindful about what it could mean for your business and how you're going to manage that employment relationship.
Fantastic. And I was thinking about, Brita, what you said. How do you create a culture in a remote environment? Now, just to elaborate a little more on that, a question for you is, what is HR strategy and why is it important for culture?
So for me, I would say that HR strategy is looking at your, not only just like your business, but like the people side of things very holistically. And so everything is kind of circles back to your employees and the people, your team that you have, right? So it's important to get it right. And it doesn't have to be right the first time. It's all trial and error, especially as you are growing your business, establishing your business, while things are evolving. Your HR strategy is always going to be evolving as well. And so I think the way that culture ties into that is within your HR strategy, you'll be wanting to think about the team culture, the community in your workforce that you're building. And I think, the biggest part of this, so when I work with my clients, I'll step in and my initial part of the process of building an HR strategy is to do an audit, really take an assessment of what's already in place. This could be HR systems. This could be company values and culture, mission statements that tie into that. It could be different HR initiatives that an organization has already decided, like, these are our people initiatives. So I look at that and I kind of go from there. We prioritize by creating a roadmap. I think it's important to prioritize the initiatives related to your human side of everything. And so part of the roadmap is not only initiatives, but kind of looking at things, from a human capital perspective. So human capital meaning what an employee brings to your organization, whether it be skills, training, expertise, knowledge, all of those pieces that kind of go into that. So I think, when you're thinking of your HR strategy, you're looking at so many different components of what you have in place and what initiatives you'd like to put in place. And then what are the steps moving forward? And I know we could go very much into depth on that, but
Right.
I'll kind of stop there. Because there's so many aspects of, HR strategy. There's talent acquisition, there's people operations, there's so many different components that go into HR in itself. So it's a big topic, and we could probably do an entire hour on just that.
Emily, anything to add on that?
No, I think Brita really covered it. That's really interesting.
And I wanted to ask, I heard you, Emily, talk about a handbook. So this question for you, do I need an employee handbook, and why would it be important to someone that owns a business?
Oh, to me, Amberlyn?
Yeah, let's start with you.
Totally. So, so handbooks are important. That's a place where you can kind of put your practices, your policies, and the intent of that really is to provide one place for employees to look up, expectations and things that you want them to be aware of working for your organization, right? I personally really like handbooks. I have a feeling Brita probably does too. But what I would say is, so if you're someone who doesn't have one yet and you're thinking of creating one, I really like them. I think they're awesome. I, would encourage everyone to have them. But if you're in a spot where you feel like, you're going to put this thing together and you might not keep it updated or you might not follow it, that's a situation where, it's okay to be a little bit more flexible, I guess. But what we don't want to have is a book of rules that no one follows or no one pays attention to, right? Because that's not really helpful for your employees. It's not helpful for you from a legal perspective. But ideally, we'd have handbooks that we update frequently. So if you do have a handbook, the types of things that you could put in there, like I said, are employee expectations, policies like anti-harassment, anti-discrimination, a grievance process, I would call it, or an employee complaint process if something comes up, so that employees know how to raise sensitive issues in your organization, anti-retaliation provisions, and kind of performance review, discipline type things, which kind of requires you to give some thought to how you want to handle these types of issues in your business. When we talk about, anti-discrimination or anti-retaliation policies, those can be very important. Certainly, if you ever find yourself in any type of litigation in those areas, in terms of notifying your employees about, what you will and will not tolerate. And it really becomes a question of, you put these things in place, you have to adhere to what you put out there, right? So I think they're super useful to have from those perspectives. And beyond that too, I would also say, that's kind of the legal, anti-risk answer. But from a day-to-day standpoint, leave policies, if you are covered by state or federal leave, that's important to put in there so employees know what to expect if they got sick or what have you, needed to take time away from work, and really just a way to make sure that you're communicating what your obligations are under the law so employees know what they're entitled to under the law. That's really at the point. Britta, I don't know if there's anything in there that you'd like to add.
I think what I'd add is I think I'm on board with you. I love a good handbook. So as long as, working with my clients last year, I think I created about 20 different handbooks. One thing I will add is that I always suggest to my clients that we kind of review it at least once a year, just because there's so many laws that change in different states each year. And typically there are, if you have any remote employees, there will likely be addendums that will need to be added into the handbook for different states, because each state obviously has different laws and compliance pieces. So I normally would review those at least once a year with my clients, just to ensure is everything up to date. And I think that kind of ties back to what Emily was saying about, well, if you're not even if it's going to collect dust somewhere on your laptop, why create a handbook? But I do think, there's been so many instances that my clients and working for employers, we've referred back to a handbook if there's any discrepancies in like what a certain leave policy looks like. The handbook is there as reference. Typically, I would send a handbook to any new hire to acknowledge that they've reviewed it, just so everyone's aligned with, this is how the organization functions. These are our best practices, like things like that would be readily available in the handbook. And beyond that, there was one other piece in there I was going to say. Oh, I also like handbooks because, I think oftentimes we think of them as like this rigid document that has all this like structure and scary clauses in it and whatnot. And ultimately, I love handbooks because they can be bespoke and you can really customize them to kind of whatever your company culture is. Like, I have clients who have like 80-page handbooks because that's how they want to function. They want everything written out. Others, we've created specific policies for like remote work is a big one that's added in there. How does the organization function as a whole? What's their policy around remote work? So that those are it's fun. It doesn't have to be a scary document that has a lot of legal jargon in it. Emily and I can work with organizations to create a more customized type of employee handbook.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Brita, too. I mean, I've definitely seen some that are, fun maybe isn't the right word, but more reflective of the organization's culture, right? So, I think that's an important note, is it doesn't have to be this, crazy, long, legal thing. It can be a lot more streamlined and kind of hit what you need to hit and then move on. But I would also just add too, and I think we kind of touched on it, but just to really like drive it home, I would say that employment law is like one area of law that is really constantly changing. Like, I feel like every year there's something new to keep in mind. And certainly if you have employees in different states too, that's when things can get really tricky. So I would just flag that for any employer, but certainly once you start to operate in different states, it's adds a level of complexity. So it's just good to be mindful of.
That's super important information. Thank you for that. Question: how would I want to foster a transparent culture in my business?
Should I jump in first, or would you like to, Emily?
Oh, you can go ahead, Brita.
Okay. I guess I personally would, to create a transparent culture, I would probably have regular communication, and also setting that like best practices or the expectations of your organization to your employees. Like, how do you best communicate? Do you have regularly scheduled meetings? What's the cadence of your all company meeting? If you have one, do you have an open door policy? So really creating some process and structure around that, and then being able to communicate that. Also, like, what is the company willing to share with its employees? Every organization operates differently. So, revenue numbers may or may not be shared, or target goals, leadership goals. Like, it really depends on your organization. So I think in order to create a transparent culture, you need to be very clear on what it is that you're willing to share with your employees and what they, vice versa too, what you would like to learn from your employees. I think also with that comes, performance management. And that's always a big one that I think plays into a transparent culture. So with that, performance management is, a big chunk of the puzzle, and there's so many other pieces that go into it. So not only performance reviews, creating a cadence around that. What does your company performance review process look like? Is it, mid-year and year end? Is it 360 reviews? Getting very clear on that so you can have these ongoing conversations around performance. And then on top of that, part of the performance management is ongoing performance. So setting clear performance improvement plans. That's always one that comes up, I think, for a lot of small business owners is, the performance improvement management piece, and what needs to be done in order to help get their employees back on track or make sure everybody's kind of on a smooth track. And so I think that all ties into having a very transparent, open communication type of culture.
Excellent. Emily, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that all makes a lot of sense and sounds like it would facilitate that type of environment in the workplace for sure. I think one other thing that I kind of think of is, when we think back to the handbook conversation, I think one of the policies I mentioned, including would be like an employee complaint process. And, a lot of times I'll hear from clients like, but I don't, my employees feel comfortable coming to me, or they, why do I have to put that in there? I don't want to like generate complaints through having a process in place. And, I think the reason why I refer to that policy is because I think it encourages employees to realize like, oh, like there's a formal structure in place. Like this is how it works. Like I'm not going to be kind of like the squeaky wheel bringing something forward. And I think from a, risk mitigation standpoint, having a process in place is good, to encourage employees to come forward so that when you first hear of like an issue, it's them coming to you. And I think doing all the things that Brita said will really facilitate people wanting to take advantage of a policy like that. Because you certainly have to have the type of culture where people aren't going to be scared to utilize that. And you'd rather have them come, to you first so that you can address a problem versus going, out externally to a third party, say, and then coming to you later on. So that's kind of what I would add from a legal perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And I always think about in the beginning when you hire someone, it's so exciting and everybody's positive, but you just having that in the handbook just protects you and protects your business. And you mentioned that having that structure. So the next question, what can folks do to help protect their business?
Yeah, I can take this one. So, I think the kind of short answer is comply with the laws that apply to you, which is a big answer. But I think, having an understanding of that obviously is important, depending on the industry in which you operate, certainly from a labor and employment law standpoint. But, I think beyond that, really, as you're hiring employees and kind of starting that process, I think it's really important to, be a leader and kind of show your employees or your workers, how you want your company to operate and how you want your company to run. So that's kind of embodying the behavior you wish to see in your employees, I guess. I'd also say if you see something that feels off, maybe it's, some type of interaction that's happening in the workplace that feels like it's not, compliant or what have you, a behavior maybe from like a supervisor or something like that to do something about it. To Britta's point earlier about managing performance, that can be, kind of challenging, but it's certainly something that, when you realize there's a problem, to address it right away is really important. I think also setting guidelines for employees. So whether that's performance related, how you do business, if you're doing any type of like compensation packages that aren't just like a straight salary or hourly rate, you're doing bonuses or what have you, setting things in place and kind of sticking to them so employees have standard expectations is really good. And then certainly if for business reasons you need to change that, to making sure you communicate that in a way that is good for employees. They understand why the decision's being made, et cetera. And I would also say, as you are kind of like growing your business, it's totally okay to reach out to a professional. And it could be a lawyer, it could be an HR person, but I'm thinking more broadly in terms of like an accountant or, a business consultant or what have you. It's a lot when you're starting an organization and you're not expected to know all the answers. And, that's why people are in these professions, is to help. So I would just kind of throw that out there as well.
And what if businesses don't have a lawyer or HR team internally that they work with? How can they implement those concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, from a legal perspective there, if you're in a position where, maybe you have a question, but it doesn't make sense to reach out to an attorney right now. I think there's a lot you can do, honestly, on like state websites, like the Maine Department of Labor website is a great resource. They have a lot of like FAQ guides, and it'll give you a sense of kind of like an issue and like what you have to do to comply. That can be really helpful as like a starting point. I know my firm too, we also do a blog. So anytime there's like a major state or federal like legislative update, we'll put out a blog post, and that can be, perhaps more helpful than just going straight to the text of the law. Although obviously you're welcome to do that too, but it's intended to be kind of like a quick synopsis, I guess, of like what you need to be mindful of. So I would say, utilize just resources online from people that are kind of staying up on these issues.
Great. And Britta, how about if they don't have an HR team?
If they don't have an HR team, there's a few suggestions. I agree with what Emily just said in terms of utilizing resources online. I think that there are lots of great resources. Even I've joined like email distribution lists of employment lawyers where they send out new compliance updates regularly. So getting kind of familiar with, whatever you need help with, like where are some of those resources? And there are different HR ones out there, which I won't name now, but happy to send out any resources if anybody needs them. But there are HR websites out there that can really help guide you in like the right direction, give you some template documents, things like that. Also there are other like HR professionals like myself. I know my team is building some self-serve HR bundles for small business owners who don't necessarily need an HR professional to help them, but could do basically a training with have a toolkit with the supporting documents for things like setting up your a performance improvement plan. And there's options out there that kind of like walk you through those steps and can lead you in the right direction. And then also I think just like maybe tapping into your network. If you don't have an HR person or you don't have an employment lawyer that you can reach out to, tapping into your network to really, someone typically will have someone to refer you to if you do need a professional's help. I think that's always the best route to go, of like asking for help.
I like that. That's a good segue into my little spiel on PROPEL and how PROPEL can help your business. And networking is huge for PROPEL's organization. Now, our mission at PROPEL is to really enrich Maine's economy by developing that environment and that culture where young professionals can thrive in the region's growing business community. I know we have been known to serve young professionals because we are run by young professionals, but really we need everyone in the community to help show up to the events, meet the young professionals that run PROPEL, that volunteer and are looking for resources out there. But I really encourage anyone in any stage of your career or any stage of your business to come meet with us. And it's fun that we can showcase two of our PROPEL board members here. And I bet you that a lot of our followers don't know that we have an HR consultant or employment and labor attorney on the board. So it's just really, really cool resource. And if we can help in any way, please reach out. We host networking events, we do development and professional skill building and events like this, and hopefully more lunch and learns to come. Now I just want to jump into questions. We're at the 12:42 mark. We have some questions coming in. I see a question from Serenity Me. I think that's Greg. Hi, Greg. Here it is. As a small startup business, what incentives can be offered beyond compensation?
I love this question. Is it okay if I jump in, Emily?
Yeah, no, totally.
I love thinking of this from like a strategic standpoint. Aside from compensation, you can offer a variety of things, and it's kind of up to you. I like to start with like, what does paid time off look like? And in Maine, it is different than in other states. From looking at it as a perspective of like vacation time versus sick days. In some states, those are separated. So looking at how much paid time off, and it's not always about paid time off, but that's where I'm starting here. Just because we are seeing a change in generational change in the workforce. And there's a lot of, data coming out about what our Gen Z looking for versus millennials. And a big thing does kind of come down to this work-life balance, which ties into the paid time off. But it could be other things. As a small business owner, it might be difficult to offer a full health incentive, like a health insurance plan or dental or vision. It might be difficult because those can be quite costly. So maybe you look at offering a stipend instead, if available, of a certain amount offered to kind of subset those costs. Also, there's other small business owners that I've worked with have offered everything from like not only just like work from home, but then like offering work from home setup. So like monitors and other equipment that might make someone's experience a little bit better and easier. Also like Wi-Fi and cell phone reimbursements, small things that do kind of help employees to offset some of their costs. And those are just kind of nice to haves. Also just like team building days and those can be virtual as well. I think a lot of small businesses, that's something easier to implement, is like creating community and engagement that way. So those are just a few ideas, but I think that there are a variety of options to explore, and kind of creating a cost benefit analysis of those might be helpful as a small business owner before rushing into offering too much or things that might add up the costs a bit.
Emily, anything to add, Emily, on that?
No, I think Brita covered that really well.
Thank you, Brita. Let's see this question. Arligear Design created their own handbook. Is this okay, or do they need an HR professional or legal counsel to review it? Maybe Emily?
Yeah, no. So I think I would, I think it depends on what's in the handbook. I do think, if certainly wage and hour considerations, you know, I would probably err on the side of having a quick review completed. And certainly if you already have it drafted, that'll be a lot faster than asking, someone to write it. But I don't think it hurts to have a once over. Again, I feel like the law is just constantly changing, and there might be things that you can put in there now that'll help you, as the year goes on and as certain bills are passed, so that you're not having to play catch up or make revisions later. But I think that's awesome that you have one, because a lot of organizations don't, which, as I said, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a great step.
Awesome. Brita, any thoughts?
Nope, I'll leave it at that.
Leave it at that. Perfect. We have another question here. In my business, HR tends to include business operations, finance, and everything in between. I'm too small to hire multiple people to do one job. Is that okay?
Would you like me to take this, Emily, or would you like to?
Oh, you can take it, Brita.
Okay. I think there is oftentimes, and I've seen this way too many times, where HR gets roped into everything. And it is almost expected in a lot of small businesses where someone might be the CEO and they're also doing HR and they're also plain accountant. And I think that's fine in the beginning. As a business evolves, I do think it would be beneficial to many businesses, not all, but many, to really kind of separate that and let HR focus on the people side of things. Business operations might tie into that, but it might also be helpful to have an accountant whose expertise is in finance and accounting to really focus on those aspects. So the short answer is it's okay. But I think as you kind of look at evolving your business, it's probably beneficial to separate the people side of things from the other aspects of your business too. And I'll leave it at that.
Great. Perfect. And I think that is all the questions we have for today. And it is 12:48. I know you both are probably hungry too. And I just want to leave on this note that please follow us on PROPEL on our social media, sign up for our newsletter again, and feel free to reach out and email us and find us on LinkedIn personally. We would love to help in any way. But thank you for joining our first ever Lunch and Learn for PROPEL. Thank you, Brita, and thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day.